Hey guys! I wasn't actually going to write a review for this book. I never intended to make it a video. I just kind of bought the book as something to read in between cosplays, and I kind of also found it on accident. But the further I got into the story, I kind of just decided to do it. So this is going to be a spoiler review. So if you care about spoilers and you want to read the book yourself, please do so before watching this video. Otherwise, if you're still here and you've read the book, or you just want to know why I'm about to rant about it, let me present to you my 2 cents on the story of Mother Knows Best, the tale of the old witch from the movie Tangled. For those who haven't read the book or need a refresher, let me get you up to speed in a very brief overview of the story. Gothel and her 2 sisters live in the Dead Woods, ruled by the Queen of the Dead, her mother. After their mother dies by Gothel's hand, the sisters are left alone. 3 witches, known as the Odd Sisters, enter the forest as Gothel's siblings fall ill and begin to worsen, and eventually they pass away in Gothel's absence. In an effort to revive them, Gothel uses the Rapunzel flower, which is the same golden flower from the movie, but unfortunately it doesn't work. After this, Gothel is sent away from her home, being left with only the golden flower. That soon is also taken away from her when the queen of a nearby kingdom falls ill. From here, the events of the film take place, with a mixture of magic and mind-wiping in between. The overarching motive for Gothel, however, is to save her sisters and bring them back to life, using the flower, and now Rapunzel, as a tool. If you don't understand the plot from that summary, congratulations! You feel exactly the way I did from the beginning to the end of this book! So, seeing this book at Zing among the other villain backstory books was surprising. I wasn't aware that these backstory books even existed. Serena Valentino, who is the author, started writing these stories in conjunction with their respective films back in 2009. She started with The Evil Queen and then followed on with The Beast, Ursula, Maleficent, and now Gothel. As far as I've researched, these books aren't canon, and I'll get into more details about this later. However, one of the main reasons that made me pick up this book in the first place is that it was portrayed as a standalone backstory to Gothel. With no prior research into what this series was or what the book was about, I was highly convinced that this was going to be canon information in the form of a narrative. There's nothing in or on this book that suggests otherwise. It's Disney official, it has official Disney artwork, and the only thing that can basically make you toss up whether it's canon or not is that there's an inscription on the second page that says, "This story is adapted in part from the film Tangled." However, that's pretty much as far as it goes. Some are welcome to suggest that this is canon because, well, it's Disney official. However, as I said, I'll be getting into more details about this later. Personally, the writing style in which Valentino uses really isn't my favourite. It's not a style that I particularly like to read, and if I can help it, I'll tend to avoid books that use it. It's hard to describe what I'm trying to say. However, I believe it's the way that Valentino describes and fleshes out situations and characters which just turns me off completely. The book, I believe, is made for younger teenage readers, so this is probably why the style is so simple in a way, and why there are so many chapters to split up the action. However, you can write a book for teenagers, and still write it in a way that it will intrigue even an adult reader. There's also a lot of unneeded information which is given to us for no reason. Whether this is to make the book look more fuller or seem like some of the characters and situations have more depth, I'm not sure. The chapters themselves are quite short and tend to focus on one event at a time, which is fine. However, there's just so much information in some of the chapters that some of them just aren't needed. For example, near the end of the novel, the Odd Sisters have almost 3 whole chapters where they basically commentate over scenes of the film. There's also multiple times throughout the novel where they ramble on about tea and cake and anything that isn't relevant to the story. Even the Sanderson sisters from Hocus Pocus aren't written to be this annoying. It's such a waste of time and space, which would have been better spent on focusing on Gothel's side of the story throughout the events of the film, instead of having annoying side characters, which we don't particularly care about, commenting on every action taken. As I was reading the book, I found that there were multiple writing tactics that Valentino uses to further the story. The first one I like to call the "this amount of time has passed" tactic. Essentially, at the beginning of a new chapter, the author announces that a period of time has passed and then continues on with the events. 10 out of 37 chapters start this way or mention this phrase in the first page, which is understandable, but it's also quite ridiculous. It's kind of a cheap way of moving the story forward without having to write anything too extensive. This is one of the many times that the writing rule show don't tell is broken. Another tactic used is one that I like to call the "they woke up" tactic. This is used more than 5 times throughout the book as a way of transversing time within and at the start of a chapter. It happened too often that after the second time Gothel woke up for one reason or another, I started to roll my eyes. I shouldn't be doing this as a reader. There's one more tactic I would like to address, and this is in the form of a twist-ish. Near the end of the novel, Lucinda, one of the Odd Sisters, mentions how Gothel is made out of magic and was never a real witch in the first place. Now, I'm not sure why this was added and why it was needed, because it didn't affect Gothel's actions or the story once it was said. So was this supposed to be an end of novel twist, or was it just trying to tie up loose ends about no father figure? Because whatever it was, it just kind of failed. So, as I said earlier, this book in particular shouldn't be considered canon if it somehow is, and the reason for that is because there are multiple inconsistencies between Mother Knows Best and Tangled, the film itself. If you wanted to believe and get invested into the book and the Odd Sisters didn't pull you out of immersion, then these inconsistencies probably finished you off. Not only is the novel completely wrong about the story of the Rapunzel flower's origin, but also where the flower is found, and how long Rapunzel is away from her family. Now, before I get into the biggest issue I had about this book, there are a couple of things that I like to mention that I did enjoy about the novel, believe it or not. Firstly, the story of the witches themselves was quite interesting. The whole magic bound by blood thing was intriguing, but it really could have been fleshed out a lot more. I wish we could have seen more of that theory. Secondly, I enjoyed how Valentino was able to develop Gothel from one innocent character to a villain. The development in her character and the overall arc of her story is interesting, and I really liked how right at the beginning it was solely focused on Gothel and what she was thinking and her experience through everything. But the Odd Sisters kind of took the limelight halfway through. And thirdly, the whole Sisters Together Forever plot point was amazing and a nice touch because it added a lot more motivation for Gothel's actions and made us more likely to sympathize with her. Although again, I have to admit, this was tainted by the ultimate involvement of the Odd Sisters, and while I'm not particularly fond of the whole film commentary thing at the end, there was fan service. Some of this was in the origin of the Mother Knows Best and the world is dark and selfish lines, and that was a really nice touch and nods to the Disney movie for fans. Now, you better pull up a cup of tea, because we're going to be spilling. No, not even a cup. You're going to need a mug. Actually, no. Pour that mug into a jug, make more. We're spilling all the tea. There is one particular thing that irks me so much about this novel. It has nothing to do about the story itself, but how the story is written and appears to be something it's not. And there are 2 layers to this. The first layer is how Valentino tries to intertwine all the books through the use of the Odd Sisters themselves. Now the problem is, specifically in this novel, they're not needed. All the events that transpire throughout the novel could have been rewritten to happen even without the intrusion of the Odd Sisters. If anything, they just make everything more complicated and harder to understand. Without them, this story could have been so much more interesting. Gothel could have easily have been able to lose her mother, her sisters, her home, the flower, and her life without the Odd Sisters interfering. It's as if we're being forcefully spoon-fed original unneeded characters for the sake of being original. What makes this worse is that as soon as they're introduced, the plot begins to revolve around them when it should be revolving around Gothel. It just seems so forced. However, I thought this before I knew that the book was part of a series. So this is where the second layer lies. It was only after I finished the book and started doing some research did I know that this book was actually part of the aforementioned series of villain books. Just like whether this book is canon, there is nothing on or in this book that suggests or says it is part of a series. Had it have been clear to me that it was the 5th book in a series, I probably wouldn't have bought this and started from the beginning and then worked my way up. I wouldn't have been confused halfway through when characters such as the Odd Sisters cat, which can apparently talk, the Dragon Witch, who I've got no idea who it is because it's not Maleficent, and I'm gonna butcher this, Secree, suddenly appear and are mentioned with no reasoning behind who they are, and when events are mentioned that have nothing to do with the current story. It's confusing. I don't know why you would have a book that is so far into a series that is being developed and not advertise that it is part of a series. It doesn't make sense from a reader's point of view, and it doesn't make sense from a money-making point of view. I mean, wouldn't you want to advertise that the book is part of a series so that the reader can buy all the books and understand the story? The advertising choice is so odd and it's so confusing. And the reader themselves has to do all the legwork and figure out the reason they don't understand is because they haven't read the other books. And here's the next kicker. These books aren't even advertised, let alone mentioned in the product they've just read. Readers should not be expected to do this. The information should be available to them in the novel, rather through story or as extra information. So circling back to the Odd Sisters, I now understand that their inclusion is because those characters are reoccurring in all of the villain books. And while I can't speak for the other novels in the series, just looking at this story alone, they're still a pretty huge waste of time and space. I believe if I've read the other books, I probably would be inclined to have a different view on them, but as a standalone story, their inclusion in Mother Knows Best, it just isn't worth it. So my final verdict. If you for some reason are watching this video and haven't read the book, but still want to give it a go, please start with the Evil Queen and work your way up. It's not worth starting halfway through the series and reading your favourite villain story and then pushing your way through it like I have. It's not worth it. Unfortunately, I do rank this quite low at a 4 out of 10. It's a decent story, not impossible to read, but it is cringeworthy and nails on a chalkboard level irritating if you're starting on this book or just really like the original movie. This book doesn't do the film justice at all, and unfortunately I wouldn't recommend this book for any of the current readers of the series or my Disney fan friends. And because it wasn't made clear, my interpretation of this series is now pretty much ruined. I won't be buying any of the other books or giving the very first one a shot simply because of how deceiving the marketing and advertising is and how so very obnoxious Valentino's original characters come off and how they're inserted into the story. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to this video and listening to me rant. That was my spill the tea for the week. I don't ask for any likes or comments, but if you'd like to share your thoughts on the book, feel more than welcome to do so and share your experience with me. So until the next video, have a great day.